I woke up this morning and I thought I was in the state of Washington in the USA because it was so foggy and dark and raining. The thunder was going and the lightning was flashing. But here we are. It's a good day.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about Israel caught in Egypt.
This is part of building the nation, right?
And this is part of building a nation. God's going to do something to get a nation. And these people, the prophecy of Abraham that they would be there 400 years did not have to come to pass. It's all in what we choose to do. So they themselves were not there 400 years. So some scholars say, well, from the time that the prophecy was given to Abraham until he came out was 400 years. And that's how they figure that. But if they had left after Joseph was no longer the ruler, they could have left without a big deal because they weren't enslaved yet. And the people remembered how good, and they could have said, bye-bye, we're going home now. But they didn't do that. Instead, they assimilated to some degree. Some of them assimilated into the Egyptian culture.
Sure.
And yet the bulk of them lived there in Goshen, where it was it to grow things because the Nile River irrigated it. And they had all the food and they were comfortable.
And the sheep.
They had their sheep. They were comfortable there. So why would you pick up and leave? You've got a house, you've got your sheep, you've got your wife, your kids, and you're comfortable. So God had to allow them to get uncomfortable because Jacob, Israel, their father, had told them, your land's back there. You take my bones back there to bury. That's where you belong. So they got uncomfortable. You know, it wasn't just bad for the Egyptians. They had it bad. And when it was all said and done, there were several things they had to do in order to be free from that slavery. They had to reject the gods of Egypt. They had to show that they were listening and believed in the God of their fathers. So some of them had assimilated. They may not have chosen to do what the specific instructions were in order for them to be free. God had told Pharaoh, these people are my firstborn son. And if you don't let them go, it's your firstborn son for mine. So they were given specific instructions, but one of the main things that they were told to do was to kill this. It had to be either a female or a male goat or a male sheep of the first year. This was the god of Egypt. So they had to slay the god of Egypt. Now, any Egyptian seeing them do this could be really angry with them. You don't do this to our God, you know.
Like killing a cow in India.
Yeah, it's like killing a cow in India. So they had to do that first, and they had to follow explicitly all the rules that God gave as to how they were to be prepared to go and what they were to eat and when they were to go and so on and so forth. So they followed God out to the desert. Now they're free. I want to talk about freedom and comfort this morning because you can either choose comfort, and there are a few of them that did that, or you can choose freedom. Adam was given total freedom to choose what he wanted to do. He either wanted to take his shortcut to get knowledge and wisdom, or he could choose to He could choose life and go God's way.
The garden was comfortable.
The garden was comfortable, but he was curious.
Mm-hmm.
And he was free to choose.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get on track, he eventually has to choose what God had in mind for this earth and what he was appointed to do.
Right.
Okay, so now God's working now with Abraham and wanting to build a nation that would represent him
Mm-hmm.
and do the thing that needed to be done on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I found something that...
It's like Israel was the second Adam.
That's right. Now, Rabbi Sachs is, he was a philosopher, witty author, moral voice for our time, and he was the head of the,
The chief rabbi.
he was the chief rabbi of England. He's very well thought of and teaches quite well. He says, looking at the history of mankind since those days, the days of Israel coming out of the nation, out of Egypt, there's a significant thing. One that had to do with religious knowledge, but it didn't have to do with religious knowledge, but politics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So he is seeing something I have seen. The major idea is politics, not religion.
Mm-hmm.
At Sinai, a new kind of nation was being formed and a new kind of society,
Right.
one that would be an antithesis of Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
in which the few had power there and the many were enslaved.
Mm.
It was to be, in Abraham Lincoln's words, in the Gettysburg Address, a new nation conceived in liberty
Mm.
and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes women and children,
Mm-hmm.
because all of them were involved in making this covenant with God. Indeed, without the covenant at Mount Sinai, Lincoln's words might have been inconceivable.
Mm.
For nowhere else do we find anything like the politics of Mount Sinai, with its radical vision of a society held together not by power, but by the free consent of its citizens,
Wow.
to be bound individually and collectively by a moral code
Mm.
and by a covenant with God.
Wow.
So
Powerful.
all of any freedom in the political realm in the nations of the world can only be achieved if it goes through the same formula.
Mm-hmm.
One group of people that we know for sure went through this process was the ones that left England and went to America, and they conceived of a nation just like Abraham Lincoln says here.
Mm-hmm.
In order to be free,
Yeah.
it has to be the people having the power, not the rulers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, under God means he who perfectly knows how to rule people
Mm-hmm.
and gives people more freedom than sometimes they can handle, is only one that we want to be under, because he knows that eventually, when we get stuck, we'll come back to him. So, in order to be a free nation, we have to choose freedom rather than comfort. If we choose comfort, we are going to become enslaved by those who are in power, because we see them as a source of our comfort. Now, if we choose freedom, God sprinkles a little comfort along the way, but that's not the goal.
That's not the goal. Yeah.
And the problem with this is, for mankind, we always seek comfort before we do freedom.
Mm.
What comes with freedom?
Yeah.
Responsibility.
Mhm.
What comes with comfort? Somebody else is responsible.
Mm.
You don't have to grow up
Mm.
if you choose comfort.
Hmm.
So why would a group of people want to sink back into that?
Hmm.
Because comfort is such a strong, powerful draw.
Mhm.
The first drought, and we're crying.
Mhm.
The first problem, and we're crying. Oh, let's go back to Egypt where we had leeks and garlic, where we could eat the fish from the sea.
Yeah.
And God was going to provide them something that would take care of them, but it wasn't going to be comfort. You have to eat that stuff every day. Same old stuff. You figure out how to make it taste different.
What recipe do you have?
And when it looked like there was no water, instead of saying, "Oh, I know he's my shepherd, he'll take care of me," it was, "Why are we out here in this desert to die without water?" No, the lack of faith. But the person who overlooks these difficulties and believes that God is doing what he says he's going to do is like Caleb and Joshua. Oh, don't let a few little things like this bother you.
Yeah.
We're going to something great.
We have a great God.
There's a destiny that they couldn't conceive of yet. They needed leaders that had a vision. What was the purpose of us being a nation? They didn't quite conceive that yet.
Yeah.
When a nation gets the concept of what their purpose in the world is, then they can hang on to that idea of freedom and pushing forward and taking responsibility. So Frank and I have been reading a book by Michael Oren, and he talks about the United States and how their policy here in the Middle East and around the world was not to conquer and rule over people like England had done, but rather help people to be individual nations that ruled in freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't particularly concerned what the shape of the government was. They just wanted them to have self-rule.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we are called to. We are not to dominate other people or judge them. They will follow along when they see a shining city on a hill. That's what the nation of Israel is supposed to be. That's what the nation of America is supposed to be, because that's what they made a covenant under God.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the same principles
Mm-hmm.
that Israel coming out of Egypt. They even said it. They wrote it.
Yeah.
We are the new Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think this is what has made me feel like we really need to focus on nationhood
Mm-hmm.
and the relationship of this nation with God, rather than it's a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how God deals with them, because they didn't grow up overnight.
Mm-hmm. No.
And we're still trying to get our feet on the ground and try to be the nation that has a vision for what God wants in the world. We haven't gotten there. And sometimes I think there are individuals in America that may have more of a vision for that than we do here in Israel.
Mm.
Israel's been beaten and all of their own accord. I mean, they've brought themselves into this problem, we'll see, through the prophets. And so they are still trying to recover who they are, what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm.
So when you consider things. Remember Israel in that light, that they are struggling to become what God wants them to be, because he says, you're going to be my witnesses. You're going to be my ones that show the world who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's freedom in living by my rules.
And how to be the right kind of nation.
Yeah, how to be the right kind of nation. So we'll look at more how they struggle to become what they are to be in the remaining videos of this particular group. Okay? Goodbye and have a good week.